Hello everyone, good afternoon. This is next to last session, so let's make this count. And our topic is today, less shooting in the dark, and how can user research help save time, money and pain in game development. And I'm Mia, I'm presenting from the user research side, and she's Sophie, presenting from the game development side. Okay, so first a quick introduction, just that you understand better the case studies we are showing later. So I have been working on mainstream user research for 13 years in big corporate research, EU research, and very small, small research projects, always on the consumer space, working on new technologies, and also founded some startup regarding this software as a service. And this path led me to Rovio and to free-to-play games, where there is a very similar funnel challenges happening in free-to-play gaming. And now I've been working for Rovio for 1.5 years. So very quickly about Rovio. For students, you might like to know that Rovio was founded 2003. It was born from a research project by students. And now it employs 400 people. It has 3 game studios and a brand licensing unit. And as you might see, our biggest IP is Angry Birds, turning 10 next year. And with 4 billion downloads, our Angry Birds game series is one of the most downloaded games of all time. And we have 3 game studios, as told before. We are concentrating on casual to mid-core gamers. And we have RPG, battle and puzzle studios, RPG in Sweden and battle and puzzle in Finland. And I'm working on the central user research team, serving all the game studios and game teams. And Sophie is working on puzzle studio.
So yeah, as well a bit about myself. Hi, I'm Sophie. I reached my 10-year anniversary in the mobile gaming industry recently, and I'm French. Started to work at Gameloft, if you know about it. And back in the days, it was not free-to-play games as we know today. It was premium games on the Java phones, Nokia, Ericsson, games like that. And as free-to-play started to rise, I worked also on social network games, console as well a bit, and specialized focus on free-to-play mobile. And throughout my journey, I specializing even more in casual mobile games. And I joined Wuga, a company based in Berlin, and was leading titles such as Diamond Dash and Jelly Splash, if you know about it. And going further north, I joined the flock of Rovio 2 years ago in Finland as an executive producer, and working now on a new title in the puzzle studio, and representing today on stage with Mia how it went for us for user research from the game team perspective. So what are we going to talk today about? Why are we here? Why user research is important? Why does it matter? That's the question as well from game teams we ask ourselves. And as we agree that user research is important, how do we do this from there? How do we incorporate user research in game development? And to do that, we will present 2 case studies that have been real case on the game I've been working on, a new game in a prototyping phase, how we used the user research. And what were the takeaways from that? And that we as well offer to the audience today, takeaways that you could use from tomorrow already in a reasonable time and budget. But yeah, basic question from a game developer point of view, what is user research? What is it, Mia?
Okay, thanks. So to put it simple, user research is looking at your game from the player's perspective. It's not making decisions, it's bringing information for making the decisions and for design. So what information is it then bringing? It can study players, how they perceive your game, how they interact with your game, how they respond to the game, and how the game makes it feel. And why is it then that these kind of different perspectives are needed and the study is needed? This is a picture, this old picture, some of you might have seen this before, but the question goes again, what do you see in this picture? Anyone? Okay, so you see the both, okay? Does everyone see, who sees a young woman in here? Okay, not everyone. Who sees an old woman in here? Yay! So this was from a recent science alert where Australians were studying a bunch of people looking at this picture and noticed that what you see in this picture correlates sometimes your age. So the oldest of the audience saw here an old woman and the youngest see a young woman. And if you cannot see the either one, so with the red arrow with the stripe, for an old woman it's a mouth, the black, where is the black stripe there is a mouth, and this is her nose for the old woman. And for the young woman, this is the necklace, and here is her jaw. She's like this. So, so the perception of this age, this picture seems to be related a little bit to person's age. But don't worry, people in the middle, so not very young, not very old, they see either one. So it doesn't imply anything about your age, what you saw in here. So similarly, if you are an expert, you are expert on your game, the things you see and perceive in your game might be quite different from a new player coming to your game and seeing the game for the first time. And how do we study then? How do we do this user research? There is lots of methods, and today we are concentrating on the kind of, let's say, here part, the prototyping part, and the idea and why we chose exactly these two case studies and this phase for this talk was that it's very easy to start. We show some methods that are relatively easy to do for everyone, independent of your team size. Even if you are sole founder of a new company, you can try something out. And also at this phase, when you are just prototyping, any research you do tends to be kind of effective, so it can actually save time, money, and pain in your development. But Sophie, why to do user research?
Yeah, thanks. So as we understand more about what is user research, it's indeed a question as a game developer. Why should we use it? Because it will imply time, process. So why? Coming back to how we make free-to-play games nowadays, I'm sure you are familiar with these phases of development. They are pretty standard now in the industry. But indeed, we pick up an idea, we believe in it, we produce it, and we launch it towards the soft launch, where we look into the numbers, the targets versus the reality. What's the reality there? Well, we kill it. And it's not sometimes, it is most of the time. And sad fact here is that it took sometimes 2 to 3 years of development before reaching that conclusion. It is quite a painful process. And think about it for a team working on the same game several years, how often we have to go through that same cycle, working, investing energy, killing, and starting from zero and over again. So why? Why are we failing at that phase? Why is it so hard to launch a new game nowadays? Why even big companies with great products out there face the same challenges? So we have to revisit back on how we used to make games. Are you familiar with the game jam concept? Yeah? I hope you are. I mean, working in the industry. So similarly to the game jam, yes, we explore ideas, we look for what is fun, we test a lot of things, and we present it for feedbacks, and yeah, we get excitement. The team is excited, the company is supportive, the CEO is excited, even your mom is excited. So with a leap of faith, then we give it all the budget, resources, money, towards the soft launch. And we hope that everything goes for the best, because after all, we are experts in games. We know how to make games. We know what is fun. People love it when they see the games. It has to work. The reality is that we crash. Not one time, multiple times. It has to stop. This is madness. Think about it, how long we took to reach that conclusion of killing and doing it over and over again. Reality is, yes, it's pretty crowded out there. The market is very competitive. There are amazing games out there that still stay in the charts after several years. Candy Crush, Clash Royale, Fortnite, amazing games. So what are we competing with? No matter how creative, innovative the idea we have, we end up making a game that no one needs. There are really great games out there, so to answer that question, ask yourself, what is the need you are covering? What maybe is a problem that you are solving? And what is the value you add with your game? And to answer that question, there is a fundamental one, is that, do you know who are your players? If you have to think about player needs, you have to understand who is your audience, your target audience. So let's assume here, for the sake of the example, you have done your diligence work, you know who is your audience, and moving forward, where do we start from? So many questions. Okay, you have a rough idea of the concept, you know who you try to serve with your game, but what now? So it takes me to my first case here, how we used, during the prototype phase in our game, unsupervised playtesting with online tool. So as I mentioned, I worked in the puzzle studio, and it's a casual puzzle mobile game. And how we started that game? Well, we as a team, we started it roughly a year ago. We had an ambition. Yes, we wanted to bring a value to the market. We took a new approach with that game. We believe that we could bring the puzzle experience to the next level, whatever that means, but we had a take on that. And we also made a lot of assumptions when we started to concept our idea, but again, we believe strongly that this is the way to go to add value to the genre. So yeah, we had a lot of unknown. And myself, as a product lead on that game, I have many burning questions. But I had to start from somewhere because, as I said, many questions, it can be quite alienating. We had to start from very simple. Can players understand our concept? Very simple question. We, as designers, we understand it for sure, but can our players understand it? And we believed as well that we could improve the usability, meaning by that we saw some problems in the current games that we believe as a team could solve. So that were our two burning questions we started with. And we had many other questions following, but I don't even dare to go there because we had to start with these two basic questions. So from there, yes, we had a plan. So that's good to start with a plan. What is it? We had what I call a minimum playable. So we prototyped, and it was a prototype shape, the core gameplay. It was, like I said, minimum playable, but just enough so you can have a sense of feeling of what the game is about. And we knew who was our target audience. And why were we making that test? Again, we didn't want to invest several years in finding out this is the wrong game we are making. So we wanted to get learnings as fast as possible. Are we building the right thing? Can people understand and even interact with our game, even if there's not a lot of instructions? That were the main questions. How did we do this? We used Playtest Cloud and iterated a lot with that tool. And that comes to talking more about what is that tool.
Thanks. So in this case, we used, we call it now unmoderated remote playtesting to define it quite specifically. But basically, we use an online playtesting tool. And there are several of these kind of tools for mobile playtesting. There is Playtest Cloud or Go Testify, and there's also others. For this, we used playtesting. Playtest Cloud. How many of you have been doing this kind of online playtesting? Okay, great. So there is a few. So maybe I then briefly tell how it's being done. So with the Playtest Cloud or this kind of online tool, actually starting the playtesting is quite easy. The tool provides you recruiting. You can just define, you make an account, like in any online service. You make an order for a playtest. You define the number of people you want, what age, what sex, but most importantly, what games they like to play. And then, of course, you define the length of the session, and the tool provides you the session recording as well as the end survey support. So all you have to do for the survey is to define the questions. And of course, then you also need the build. The build needs to be such that players can play it for the session time you have decided. It can be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, or it can be even several sessions. And the recording you get is a video. Here is an example of such video from one player. So you see the screen, the player playing there with the red dot showing where she's touching. You also hear her talk aloud. So players are encouraged to talk aloud while playing so that we hear what they are thinking, at least what they say aloud. And then you, of course, get also the survey results. So after you've gotten the recordings, what you need is to do the analysis, look at the recordings, look at the survey results, compile results, and turn them into actions, which is a very important part of the research. And this part, of course, cannot be provided by the online tool. So advantages of this kind of playtesting method. Recruiting is really easy, and it's even targeted, so you can get players who like certain kind of games in there. It's really fast. We are in Europe, so if we set up an order in the afternoon, we get during the night the players in the US can play, and in the morning we typically also already had the recordings with us. It's very cost efficient, both in terms of money and effort. And this all makes it very easy to iterate this kind of testing. So that is what I find is really valuable in here. So if you make a big improvements, big changes, new features, it's quite easy to put this test again. And of course, in this case, mobile players, they play in their own environment, which makes it more realistic. Partly, I will talk about it later. Disadvantages. Everything seems so easy so far. So of course, there has to be also some disadvantages. This requires a build that players can play quite independently. It's possible for you to add some instructions, but basically they rarely read the instructions. So it's good to be such that they can play forward without any instructions. There's no interaction with the player, so you get the recording, she or he talks there, whatever he or she talks, but you don't have ability to ask or interact during that time. And also, sometimes, not often, but sometimes I get the feeling that some of the players there have been doing this a lot. And they might be a little bit motivated more from the money than the actual enjoying the play. And I might be hearing television in the background, which kind of makes me worried. I know that some people play mobile games with the television on, that's okay. But then if I hear them like they are just being rewarded for beating a level or get a new chest, and they say interesting and yawn after that. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting mixed messages. Are you enjoying or are you not enjoying? And I have no way of finding that out. On the other hand, if we get a feeling that this player is not really the target player or this recording is bad, we can always get a new one. So this is not a big problem. Now I let Sophie to tell the results.
So yeah, coming back to the test we ran, so we presented that prototype that had the core loop. And what were the results I want to highlight here? The results I'll present are the results of several iterations that happened. As we saw the first Playtest Cloud, there were some frictions, but we tested it to the point that we were satisfied with the results. People could get the game, could play the game, interact with the game, intended behavior inside the game happened as we designed it. So all good. And then beyond, I would say, the ratings we had about the test, we also learned even more about the game. So we got qualitative feedbacks, what people enjoyed in the game, because you have a survey at the end of a test where people can just express on what they liked and why. So here we, as a team, took away what we should keep in the next version, what we should expand and develop even further. Actionables then from this test. Here, this is how we aggregated all the feedbacks, and I have to mention, yes, we did rely a lot on Playtest Cloud for the usability, but also on other type of feedbacks that are important to consider, internal feedbacks, the team, just different sources. And as we aggregated them together, we had the actionables, what we should keep doing, and what we can improve, or what we should stop doing. But all in all, it was a success. We were very happy with the results, and we saw that people could understand and play the core loop of the game. But that leads me then to the second case here of where we use moderated prototype testing face-to-face. So coming back to our methodology and how the question we try to answer during the development. Can player understand the game? Did we improve usability by watching the videos and all the feedbacks? Yes, we managed it. So moving forward, we had then to design the game. What is the game about? Do we have a viable game that can live beyond the launch, not just for a year, but for 5 years? Do we have a scalable game? So we spend a lot of time here more on the paper level, because it's not a question you can answer by testing with players, honestly. So then we put together the design, the metagame with a core loop, and then came again the question where we had to involve a new playable and test, does the whole loop of the game work with that core loop and the metagame layer, which was a critical question because, as I said, we were taking it far in what we were changing in the genre. So once again, we did our sanity check of, on our playable, is the usability working for what the version had? So we had to test, can people understand what is the loop about with the metagame now, and can they interact and play with it as intended? So as intended, yes, everything was fine. So then we could go further in our tests and assumptions. What was that? So at this point, it was not anymore a minimum playable, but what I call a minimum engageable. So you can think about it as a bit as an MVP, where we had kind of a simulation of the whole loop, where you have a core and, like I said, not the whole metagame, but a layer of a metagame. So people could go through that loop and have a better idea, feeling of the game. Who did we present our game at this point? The same target audience. Why? Same as before, we wanted to get learnings early enough and not fail in a year or several years developing the wrong things. So we wanted to understand, are we going in the right direction with the design and the metagame we were going for? How did we do this? We used Playtest Cloud again for usability as I presented, but we complemented it with other methods. And that's where I want to introduce the second one that we used, moderated prototype testing.
Okay, thanks. So in this case, there was already, so we are always talking about the same game development than in case one, in this case two. So by now there had already been done quite a lot of this kind of remote playtesting and internal playtesting also. And we wanted to see the live reactions of the people, so we did what I call live testing. So basically we invited players, target players, to our headquarters for an interview and play. So basically we first did this kind of starting interview, talking about, because we only targeted to people who play the games of this genre, what were their experiences with the games of this genre and what kind of expectations they had for new games, if there were new games. Then we had some tasks. We wanted some more detailed feedback on some design issues. So we had some separate tasks. Then we actually went to the playtesting and let them play a few levels. Stopped them at a certain point to find out better how they perceived certain screens, probed a little bit why, let them play again, but this time more into like being ready to discuss whatever comes up. And then, of course, the end interview and end survey. I like to also do the end survey, even if I do the interview, to let them put some numbers without me writing down the numbers. Okay, so the practical setup of such a thing, this time it requires, like, you have to organize it, right? So plan is a good thing to have. You need to think the recruiting. The recruiting is very essential part. The good thing in the live testing like this is that you actually see the players, and if you have done a not so good recruiting, you will notice it, at least. That might not make you feel better, but at least you know that you have failed. And if you're using agency, it's very good to have an agency that already knows what it is to recruit for mobile games. Specifically, I always want to talk with the actual recruiter who is calling to the players to ensure that. But of course, you can also do the recruiting yourself. And if you are in a lucky position that you have already a player registry or some contacts, you can use those. Then you need actually to set it up all, agree with the participants the times, set up a lab if you have a lab, or reserve a meeting room. Here on the upper, might help here, upper picture is our mobile streaming lab. It's our user research lab, so it's in the suitcase. We bring it to a room, and it helps us to record up to 4 players mobile screen without taking any processing power from the mobile. So we get the recording and can stream it to the game team via private YouTube channel, for example. And then on the below, you see a little bit this kind of traditional setting. So here is the document camera recording the screen and what user is doing there. And then I love to get also this kind of, especially if game team is watching or you are showing the videos to the game team, that you get this kind of facial or this kind of, better yet, general picture of the people's reactions. Then you need someone to moderate the sessions. You need to plan the recording, and if you're doing, for example, recording like this, you need to consider the privacy issues, the written consents, do you need the NDA, all this fun stuff. And then for the prototype, it's much easier because now the moderator is supporting the prototype. So even a paper prototype or a mock-up or this kind of Wizard of Oz type of prototype can do. Then you need to plan the scripts, the the tasks if you are doing such, the interviews and all this kind of stuff, until you get to doing the actual study and get to the part of analyzing the results, compiling the results, and getting something into actions. The advantages of this kind of research is quite straightforward, maybe coming up already. So this is the type of research where you can actually interact with the player while he or she is playing. It's good to plan beforehand how you're going to do it, what amount of gaming experience you want to. You don't want to disturb the player, and what are the things where you want. Then, at what point you start to dig in deeper, like the experience. Of course, you also get now the real experience of the players, because you're face to face. You know what they are saying, but you also get how they look, how they feel. And you can probe into the reasons of the reactions. It's also good to get into the deeper, you can get much deeper into the design issues and gameplay if you are able to interact. And as talked before, the interviews can be done with, so you can get the target players when you get, let's say it this way, that it's a privilege to get to know your players. It's a privilege to get to be face-to-face with them. And it's very good to utilize that privilege as well as possible by digging deeper into the reasons why they have problems with the game, why they love the game. And also you can use it to understand better about their gaming experiences, about their habits, and the kind of stuff that can help you to develop deeper understanding about your player base in general, for example, in the form of personas. The good thing also in this is that it can be adjusted not only to the level of the prototype, but also to the resources and rigor. So even though I'm a user researcher, there is a thing that, for example, Wes was talking in the morning about the crafting the experience, that craft with feedback. So there's always value in feedback in whatever way you get. And for example, this kind of live testing can also be done by if there is just one founder in the company, he can do what Lean Startup calls this kind of customer development. You can, for example, look from the Steve Blank's Lean Startup Owner's Manual or Ask Maurua's Running Lean to find more about it. It is not user research, but it is getting feedback to your ideas. And then if you're looking at the UX research, you can look, for example, Quarilla UX that aims to be very lightweight way for a team to get feedback on the designs. So this can be adjusted in terms of rigor quite a lot. Of course, then you can also buy research done by the user researcher in research labs. Or do it yourself, of course. This method is also very adjustable in terms of different tasks and measures. So if there is something that game team has been wondering about, it's easy to include in this kind of research, up to a certain limit, of course. Like you cannot include everything in there, but it's very adjustable. Okay, and again, disadvantages. When you're doing this rigorously, it really takes time and effort. So we in the industry are more used to doing this kind of a group play testing or bigger sessions, and this is really one-to-one. But the value, I feel the value is really in this kind of early research, when there might be some unknown unknowns, some new stuff coming up, and then it really pays to do this kind of user interviews to understand the user and to really understand the reasons behind their problems with the game. Moderator unbiased, that is impossible thing. So of course, it's good to try to get someone outside the team, or let's at least think that someone who has not been actually implementing the thing or who has not been designing the thing. So it might be even a producer might be a better solution here than the actual coder. Okay, and again, in this session, like when you invite people over, they are your visitors, so you have to break the kind of politeness thingy there, and this kind of awesomeness of being in a gaming company. So you need to reserve some time to soften them up and really motivate. Why do you invite people over? What do you want to achieve? Why it's important that the participants tells everything that she thinks, also the negative stuff. And sorry, what was the results again?
Yeah, so reminding again about the version that we use for that test, more closer to an MVP version where you had the whole loop, and we had a series of, 20 levels where you could play the whole loop. And what were the feedbacks we got there? Shocking, very disappointing. It was negative. So this is what was as well new and not planned for us, because we had so far very good usability tests. Even people were saying they liked it, although they were not asked about it. But when we dig in really deeper in the feedbacks of our version, we realized that we went too far. We innovated too far on our game concept, to a point that people didn't enjoy anymore what they were playing, because it was not a puzzle game anymore. And that was like a very important takeaway, to see that we just stretch it too far. And feedbacks we got, yeah, it's not really fun, sure, but it's very grindy. Like, where is my puzzle level? I don't get the point of that game. So very consistent negative feedbacks. So Actionables there, pretty simple, we killed it. We killed the idea, we killed the concept, and I'm happy to say that instead of having spent the whole time and energy of the team for a year or even beyond, it took us several months to come to that conclusion that, yes, we are going for a further long journey than we thought. So we had to ask ourselves, and that was a hard decision, although it may sound less painful, but what kind of game are we making? Are we making that game that has innovation as we believed in it, but is going away from our initial audience? And that's okay as well, but to an unknown territory, unknown audience, do we want to go there? Or are we committed to make the best game for our audience, our target audience? And that was a decision we made, going back to the drawing board and design. Let's revisit, remember, what does that mean to make a game for that audience? And for what it's worth, although we failed on that test and the feedbacks we got a lot of learnings to understand more what is the essence of a puzzle game for these players. So it actually cleared a lot of assumptions. And I'm happy to say now, where we are at the stage with our game, we took the new direction, so we scrapped everything. We did the same tasks like usability, can people understand the game, can they engage with it? And this time it was very anonymous positive feedbacks. It was right. So we understood that we got really the focus, the point of the type of game we should be making and now moving forward. So this is where I would say we saved time, money, and pain, obviously, to get the learning that we could have got in soft launch. So concluding.
Okay, so the final few slides, conclusions. Should we make unmoderated or moderated playtesting or prototype testing? That is not the question. Instead, we should adjust our studies according to the game team needs. And as discussed before, the unmoderated is very useful to do. It's easy to iterate because it needs less effort. It's less expensive. The recruiting is relatively easy with the challenges explained. But on the other hand, with the moderated, we can dig deeper with the player. And at least as a user researcher, I feel that I can trust the results because I've seen how the interaction happens, not only in terms of how the player sounds and what he does with the game, but also how she looks and how she reacts to the probing I'm doing while looking at, while doing the observations, but also in this kind of prototyping thingy, I'm doing quite a lot of kind of careful interviewing. And then in terms of usability and first-time user experience, I think this online playtesting tool works quite well. You can see if the users bump into very difficult problems or if there are some minor problems too. But in terms of the player experience, of the game experience as a whole, something might be missing, and it might not come up with this kind of online remote playtesting. Yeah, and of course the moderated one, you can also do the different kind of tests, measurements regarding the game, how easily they learn stuff, or interview them for other player understanding that you might need. So as a user research recommendations after this, there are many ways to test prototypes. We presented kind of 2 studies. They are not at all describing them all. The idea is, it's really important to do the variety of methods, variety of studies, because each study can only show you something. It brings light to certain things. There is no this kind of general lamp that you can light up and see everything at once and get this kind of full understanding. And that is also why iteration is really important. I'm not going to go through this, but there's again the red one is the development process, and you see that a lot of new research possibilities come over time. And actually the question is not what can you research, the question is how to prioritize the research. What does the game team really need to know? What are the biggest risks in the game? And what can be then regarding that, what can be find out with user research? So, and like now we talked only about prototype testing. User research is important throughout the game development process. But basically my message is, and I hope it's also Sophie's, that more good research you do, the more light you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Sophie. It was really useful and interesting. Dear guests, please ask your questions.
Hello. It seems that the topic you were talking about is, or particularly your experiences, were more with mobile games, or something, let's say, that has a lower completion life. How do you think it relates to, let's say, platforms where the games take, let's say, 10 hours or more, or let's say a longer term or a platform game, in terms of, user testing?
You mean prototype testing still?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
You want to answer that one? Or
Okay, unfortunately, I have only experience on mobile testing, but I would suggest, think that then it's until you get 10 hours to play, the game is already quite far. So I think maybe in the mobile testing, it's much easier to bring this kind of prototypes. But I'm not sure, did I capture your question right?
It's just more about kind of getting the feedback from the user, because it seems like you're doing a lot of proof of concept, right? So
Yes.
how do you, let's say, apply the idea of getting a proof of concept to a non-mobile platform?
Yeah, I can comment on that one. I would say it's not so different in the end about the platform, but it's understanding what you try to answer, right? So let's say on console, you may want to explore first a theme, different, I don't know, and you know who you are targeting, so you can already get more feedback or interactions, so comments on that. We didn't present that, but that's an example. Also prototyping, you want to innovate on the core part, or a new controls and the shooting. You can test that part, and if people get it, so you can test with people who are in shooting games, for example. So that's really in the essence of identifying the question where there's some unknown, and you want to get more learnings about it, and focusing on that part, and then finding the people who can give relevant feedbacks. But I would say it's not that different depending usability. I think it doesn't depend on the platform. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have online testing tools, but the second case study is totally applicable. So you can do this kind of live moderated interviews and playtesting there too.
So I have firsthand knowledge that 4-year-olds like shooting birds at buildings, and they also like pushing every button that has to do with a microtransaction at the same time. Do you bring in children to study, and also do you bring in the parents to study from the perspective of safeguarding games from children? Mm-hmm. Even though they like it, everybody likes it.
Okay, so we are not testing with children because of it's very difficult, and our latest games are not targeted to children anymore. So we are not really testing for children. But what was the latter part of your question?
Oftentimes we give our devices to children to keep them busy, and then you have the problem of button mashing. But I just find it interesting that your game spans really, it's 4, even probably 3 to 80. So you have there's different needs for younger kids who don't have brains.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems that, yeah.
But I would say also it's about, I think, focusing on the need, as you said, there might be different needs, and I think we can look at it from the age point of view, but I like to look at it from a motivation point of view as well, and it might be different from children playing an Angry Bird game, and I talked to some players who were 70-year-old, really a lot into competition and being on the top of the leaderboard. So it's not about the age, but the motivation is the same for a kid is 3-year-old learning and just playing around with a game, which I don't know much, so I cannot really comment, but I know more the latter audience about the competitive and challenge motivation.
Hi. Thanks for the great talk. I was wondering, for the smaller teams and companies maybe not having access to similar resources, do you have tips of what would be the strategies and what's the specific things that if you have to do one thing, do this? Because, for example, our company to like every week and month of somebody's work is actually quite valuable piece. Still, however, it is important to note these things because you can go 3 months and have to throw that work away.
Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, if the development point of view and user research point of view differs here, I would really do the market research kind of thingy. Like, I think it's, I would read this lean startup thing because I think like if you are a very small company, you have to know that you have a market. You cannot know it beforehand, but you can always stay on the top. Like, what do our target people think about the product now? And if it's a very innovative new product, then you actually, it becomes even more difficult, but you have to try. and it's, I think, like, yeah, it's not, it's well spent time from the CEO. Sorry.
Yeah, also to complement from a more game team point of view, even with a small budget, so it depends again what you are testing. Usability, we gave the example here where you try with your players, but it can be, you can already have relevant feedbacks testing with people who have no idea of what your game is about, even internally. So usually it's not somebody who is too close to the game, but just basic tests with no tutorial, see how it interacts. As well, if it's a young audience, there are many places to go to. It can be, you know, going to schools or cafes, whatever. So for that, there are many creative ways. And when it comes to having a deeper understanding of your audience, like the engagement, either you have a live game where you can actually interact more with the community to understand, so you make the most of it, or you don't have a live game, but as a similar audience of a new game you're creating, and you look into the competitors. And there are also many ways to reach out. You can be part of a community of your competitors, so studying, like, again, the audience, understanding more.
Thanks.
Well, just actually saying here, the Playtest Cloud is stupidly cheap and easy to use, so it's not like high-end product, I guess. Kind of like send a mail and you get 10 guys saying random things. It's up to someone to actually like decide that shit, but it's
basically
very
thinking that if it's sort of like get the face-to-face and stuff, or get the video from the net, or is there one thing or something kind of like that that stands out from the method structure?
I would definitely, like, for the usability part, like he said, that it's always worthwhile to put your things there to see how people play, because like getting someone to play your game for 30 minutes, you go, like, it can be much more work. And then on the other hand, if you're a new game, new company, finding out this, whether you have a market is also very important. So, but this kind of a live testing then can be quite fast. I mean, you show your idea to people who you think you should be interesting. You see whether they are or not. Like, and it doesn't take really a lot of time. Like, for example, Query UX was exactly what Sophie was talking about, going to the cafes. I'm from Finland, so I use these libraries to set up my own lab and ask from people that, hey, how do you feel about this?
Okay, thanks again. Okay, the last question, okay?
Talking about face-to-face interviews, was it anonymized somehow, or you invited players into your office so they knew which company's game they are going to play? And do you think it can influence the expectations of a player?
Yes, it does, of course. Like, there is always bias. And we were thinking of whether we should, like, rent a place outside. But since we were using our IP, Angry Birds, in the game, it kind of became obsolete. So yes, it was anonymous during the screening part. But then when they came, we gave the address. Of course, they knew they come to Rovio, and that's why I give them coffee, we talk a lot. I'm telling about what we are doing and trying to get them relaxed, but also to understand that this is really important for us to hear what he or she thinks both ways. So yeah, but I have a feeling that always when you're face to face, you are getting. Well, it depends on a person, but there is always like they tend to be a little bit more polite, or then they go to this negative mode and it goes overly negative. So yeah.
Okay,
So
thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We have only 5 minutes before the next speaker. I was really glad to meet you here, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.